Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Sifu, a game that really makes you feel like a fucking idiot for being bad at it. The game is extremely difficult, and because of this, for some reason people compare it to Dark Souls, as always, because apparently Dark Souls invented difficulty, but this game has pretty much nothing in common with Dark Souls. I want to set that record straight now, but it is a super difficult game that focuses around some great martial arts and some really interesting gameplay design choices that I really appreciated. I thought the entire experience was fantastic, albeit a very short one. They say that the star that burns brightest burns out quickest or some shit like that. Probably not even applicable here, but the game is great, but not for very long. It took me just under 8 hours to get every single ending in the game, and the game's priced at $40, and I absolutely think you get your money's worth with it. There's only 5 levels, but depending on how good you are at the game, that could take you 8 hours, which is roughly what it took me, or it could take you 30 hours if you really suck dog shit at the game. There's a very good chance. There was a lot of streamers playing the game that ended up rage quitting because they had a really difficult time on level 2 and never even got to the end. The game will challenge you, but it's fun. It never really feels like it's unfair. Sometimes the camera is pretty shitty. I think that's one of my major complaints. When you're in the middle of a fight and trying to manage a bunch of enemies that are all trying to beat your ass and you're trying to beat and eat their ass too, sometimes the camera will just betray you and get locked into like a wall or something, and then you just take some free damage and just get blasted. So that was frustrating, but it's not like the biggest, most prevalent issue that's super common. It just happens sometimes in tight corridors. So let's really get into it. I think the aesthetic is fantastic. I think the game oozes style. The martial arts looks and feels great. The combat system is pretty reminiscent of like free flow combat from the Arkham series, but with its own unique identity to it, where it doesn't really play the same as those games, but you can at least see that they're comparable, just to give you a general idea of how the combat's going to feel. But it is a truly unique experience. I haven't played gameplay quite like this. Apparently it's very much like Absolver, which is, this makes sense because it's the same developers, but I didn't play Absolver. So this was very fresh to me and I really enjoyed it. It felt great. It looked great. There was a ton of different skills that you could unlock, and they were all really cool. Some of them a little goofy, like there's a little slap one you can do while you're backing up, and I'm sure it has its uses, but from what I experienced, it didn't really play much of a role. It was just kind of like, I want to disrespect this guy, so I'll slap him across the face with my skill here. So I really think there's just so much to like about the game. There's weapons in it too, and the weapons will give you an advantage, but they have limited durability, so use them wisely, and who you want to just obliterate, just fucking clobber with them. And if you get hit by an enemy's weapon, kiss your youth goodbye, because that shit is ending you on the spot. It does so much damage to get hit by an enemy's weapon, and that's a big thing here. The game is challenging, and enemies do a lot of damage to you. And there's a really unique system here, where you start the game at 20 years old, and let's say you die. Well, instead of just like restarting from a checkpoint or restarting the whole level, you can revive yourself, but it adds an extra year to your age. So now you revive and you're 21 years old. You just stand up and now you got fucking gray hairs sprouting from your face and you're ready to keep beating ass. And that's its system that I think is really cool. So you can keep reviving all the way up until you hit 70 years old, and then if you died there, well, that's game over. Then you're going to have to restart. And I think it's just a cool system, and it stacks. So if you die again at 21, well, now it's going to add 2 years, so now you're coming back at 23, and so on and so forth. You can shave years off, not by using like biotin or Botox or whatever, but by killing strong enemies. They will take a year off, so when you die, instead of adding 2, it'll only add 1, but you never go backwards in age. So if you hit 26, you can never go back to 25. It's a really cool system that keeps it fresh, and there's these marks that you'll hit, like when you go to 30, you do more damage, but your health decreases. 40, even more damage, lower health. 50, same story. So as you age, you're doing more damage, but taking more damage at the same time. Very cool system, and I really appreciated it. It's just, there was so much depth to its combat. It just never got stale at all. And it is challenging. It's going to challenge most people because parrying in this game is tight. It is very strict timing, and it's going to be tough for people to get a grasp on it. It took me all the way till the final boss to really start nailing parrying, because the final boss is a big skill check. You're going to really need to master parrying if you're ready to take on the final boss and really want to make a good run out of it. So parrying is something that's difficult. There are dodging options as well, but it's not like it's a great get out of jail free card where you can just dodge everything and be okay using iframes. That is also pretty tight. You can't just spam it. Of course, there are ways to cheese some of the bosses, but it takes out a lot of the fun if you do that approach, I would argue. It's just a really fun game. The gameplay just feels good, and I love the challenge, and I love the unique system with the aging. It just all works. I also really just appreciated the levels themselves because I thought they were very fun in their design. They draw obvious references to martial arts movies or scenes. For example, the very first level, when you're going through like a tight hallway in a hotel, you'll notice that it's very similar to like The Raid Redemption, you know? You'll be able to notice like, hey, this kind of reminds me of that scene from this fucking badass movie where they were using martial arts. Level 2, there's the club, and it seems pretty reminiscent of the John Wick club scene. And I think it's on purpose, obviously. I think it's a nod to those properties, and I just appreciate it. And even if I'm wrong and it's not, it just happens to be kind of similar in its appearance, it's still great level design. It's still fun to navigate those levels. And a fun thing about the gameplay mechanic itself that I haven't mentioned when it comes to going through these levels is if you do game over, and you go back to the beginning of the level, there are things that you can get throughout that are like little key cards or keys themselves that act as shortcuts. So when you restart the level, you might not have to go through the whole thing. You can instead just open a door that was previously locked. Also, when it comes to skills, if you game over, those skills don't carry over unless you unlock them 5 times as a permanent unlock in your arsenal. So there's just a lot of depth to it, and it was just super fun. It really was. The bosses I thought were all great in their design, except for the fourth boss. The fourth boss was surprisingly just super easy, just a big pushover. Really, the whole fourth level was kind of weak. Levels 1 through 3 were fantastic, and the third boss was an absolute pain in the ass, a genuine nightmare. I think the third boss is the hardest in the game. And then you go to the fourth boss, and it's Weenie Hut Jr. All of the fourth level is about just fighting through a pretty bland environment before you get to a pretty underwhelming boss fight. So level 4 wasn't great, but then level 5 picks everything back up and brings that life back, and the final boss is super satisfying. And I guess it's time to talk about the narrative. I didn't really get drawn into the story very much. I think there was a lot of lore that I may have missed, even getting all the endings. I think there were still some key story elements that I didn't pick up on because I didn't think it was that compelling or that interesting. I was never motivated to hunt down the 5 people for revenge. I just never felt really attached to the character or anything like that. Not that I think I was supposed to. It seems like the narrative was pretty bare bones in order to just keep the story moving and getting you beating some ass. So it served its purpose, but it's nothing special either. Plugging Sifu into the moist meter, I'm giving it a nice 90%. I think this is just a great game, takes some risks, and I think they all pay off, and I think it's just an absolutely wonderful experience, like I really do. And I also appreciated that it's put at the $40 mark instead of $60, even though I think this could have easily been marketed and pushed as a $60 game because it is that good. I do appreciate that it's the lower price point because there's only 5 levels to it. If you're really good at the game, you could probably beat all 5 levels in like 2, maybe 3 hours. For example, when I went back to do the all true ending, you have to spare bosses, and to spare a boss, you basically have to break them twice. So I had to go through every boss again, and it only took me about an hour and a half to do all 5 bosses to get that true ending. So I basically speedran the game in an hour and a half, whereas previously it took me like 6.5 hours or so to do it. So yeah, if you're good at the game, you can really blast through all of the content that it has to offer quickly, but you'll still enjoy it every second of the way. So yeah, that's about it. See ya.